Yeah, so I'm going to write a book. It's going to be called Heidi, the sequel. Heidi grew up, moved to Maine, and brought her goats with her. Nest in there. Okay, I'm going to toss this food out here, so I'll try not to hit you.
That's fine.
That's all the grain these guys get, so they're all free range.
Yeah.
And this one's much more of affectionate. This one's very leery to something new, but that's part of what they do. They're not here to be socialized with humans.
Right.
Their job is to protect livestock. But they are very socialized to me. The dogs are here to protect them. He's waiting. He's waiting.
You sit with him.
My boy. You're my guy. You're my guy. You're my boy. He just sits here and waits. And if he's not here and I come over and sit and he's over there, he comes running over.
This is his place that he can oversee.
Yeah, they like to be up high and they can see everything. And so we check out our world. I worked for the New England Aquarium. I spent my summers and fall up in Lubec doing whale research.
I didn't know that you worked for the aquarium and did whale research.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
So that was really my passion was marine biology. Out of college, I ended up landing this research position at the New England Aquarium.
Wow.
I mean, I had worked there when I was a sophomore. Started when I was actually a freshman.
Can we carry one?
Freshman, sophomore. Yeah, you can carry that. In high school, doing work at the New England Aquarium. So I ended up back there, which was kind of cool, doing their research. We would spend the winter in Boston analyzing data, and then the rest of the time we were doing either, like, I would go up the coast of Maine doing harbor porpoise surveys or whatever, and then be in Lubec doing the right whale research.
Wow.
So I spent time in Maine. I love Maine. I'd have fish scales all over my hands, and I'd sit there and I'd be flicking fish scales off. I had otter hair all over my pants. I stunk. I thought it was wonderful. Nobody wanted to sit with me on the train.
Way to make sure though that you don't get like someone next
No
to you.
creepies, no creepies. And it's like, yeah, I'll flick a scale on you. And oh my gosh, it was so funny. But yeah, so my whole world was animals. So to do this, and all my kids are gone and I keep doing this, it's like, I don't want to give this up. It's a challenge with being in the legislature. It stresses me out because I like my animals and I want them well cared for. And when you're not here, you're gone 5 days out of the week, I question what I'm doing an awful lot.
Do you have help on the farm?
I do, yeah. But it's not the same thing as being here. And also if I see something that, I'm going to pick up on something much faster than somebody else is going to pick up on. Hour and a half.
You gotta go.
I know. Come on, Bella. Now, see how she's missing some of her hair there? She's actually recuperating nicely, but that's a copper deficiency. Look how beautiful she is.
Yeah.
A few months ago, she was starting to lose all her hair. I gave her copper dosage, and it's all come back, and she's absolutely lovely. So yeah, it's one of those things I kind of missed it because I was gone. And it's those things, I see, normally I would see these things right, catch it before it gets too bad. But when I'm gone, those are some of the sacrifices. I've had these guys, I can pick out pretty quickly when there's an issue.
Yeah.
And try and catch it early. I mean, they've been pretty healthy. I treat them mostly completely naturally with herbs and things. Good girl. All right, come on. Come on, Joy. What are you guys doing?
Aren't they hilarious?
I have a vision, you know, and I'm one of those, but I'm also very practical. So I was like, okay, these are the things. I had a long list of what had to be met before I committed. One of them was I had to find somebody who's willing to do the job during the winter, carrying buckets, hauling buckets in the snow, dealing with snow, shoveling goat paths, commit a year in advance. Like, so I needed that commitment the January prior to being in the legislature, because that was when I had to declare that I was going to run. So I did. I found somebody, and she's been great. And that was the turning point, you know, that and the fact that my husband had to be totally on board. And then I said, he needs to say, Heidi, you need to do this. So after all this stuff had, you know, all these needs had been met, at least on paper, I said to him, so what do you think? This is what's happened. What do you think? And he was standing in the kitchen, and he looks at me and goes, Heidi, you really need to do this. And I thought I was going to throw up. I was like, no, you can say no. You really can say no. It's okay. I'm totally fine with that. You can say no, because I really wasn't sure even then that that's what I wanted to do. Because I knew how much work it was going to be, and I knew the sacrifice that was going to be made. So that was the turning point.
Yeah. You homeschooled the kids?
Yeah, I homeschooled all of them. My oldest I started when he was in 3rd grade, and then I homeschooled the others, as well as some other kids, as you know, not just mine, but all the way through high school. Well, it's funny, I tend to be somebody that operates in extremes. Like, I will never homeschool. Why would I homeschool and stick my head in the sand and hide from the world? Then I end up in a situation where I have a son who needed my full attention. And I had been, for a year or 2 years actually, been spending, you know, all my spare time. Now I was building a business too, a fitness consulting business, and so spending all my spare time in the school, helping, being a, you know, just being an aide in the classroom, whatever. And then coming home and essentially reinventing the wheel. And it wasn't going well for him. He was not doing well. And I remember being in this situation, kind of backed into a corner, lots of tears, because I was going to have to give up my business, really. I was going to have to scale back, and I was going to have to reprioritize life. And I wasn't happy, because I'd been working really hard at that. But then, I mean, here's this little guy who desperately needs me. What are my priorities? So, talking with my husband, and then talking with this absolutely amazing principal from the elementary school, it was decided, you need to bring him home. It was the beginning of 3rd grade. It was a tough learning curve, because hey, I'm like, I got a good education, I went to some good schools, I was very fortunate, had a lot of extra exciting opportunities that had been presented to me that I took advantage of. I'm thinking, well, I got this, I can do this. There was no truth in that. I was as clueless, I was a babe in the woods and had no idea what I was doing. And it was an absolute disaster. So for the first year, it was disastrous. And I even tried to give him back to the school. And the principal was absolutely priceless. He said, Heidi, what good is it going to do him to have him here with somebody yelling at him? He might as well be home and have you yelling at him. And I was like, but I don't want to be yelling at him all the time. It was so difficult. And anyway, long journey, long story short, I essentially learned Oh, I did so much research, and thankfully I have a background in that, on education. And I wanted to know, what is a successful education? Is it teaching or is it learning? What's most important? Teaching, I'll do teaching, but if the learning isn't happening, my time is wasted. So there started the journey on education. That's why to this day I am passionate about the things of education, because it's about learning and an effective learning environment, which requires people like me or teacher to get engaged with a child, meet them where they're at, and then shepherd them through the process. It's a very hands-on thing. It's a very involved thing. You cannot effectively teach so they learn with a standoffish attitude. Like, here, you go do this. I'm going to assign this to you. Go spend time on your laptop and go figure it out yourself. That is not promoting learning. It's not. They might be filling the time, but they're not learning.
So, Representative, we just saw all the farm work and we saw everything that goes into maintaining your property and your livestock. And on top of that, you're up in Augusta for this year over half the year. In Augusta, though, I mean, it's probably different than, or maybe it's similar to herding animals, but what
herding cats,
herding
maybe?
Cats.
That's not a very effective skill.
So you're on the education committee and you're doing all sorts of things up there. And it's your first term in Augusta. Yep. It's your first time being representative. Is it what you expected it would be like when you got up there?
Some of my expectations were accurate, but I couldn't prepare for the utter disbelief of some of the things that took place. Mm-hmm. It troubles me beyond measure how partisan things are, and how a great idea, if presented by the wrong person, is tanked, just out of spite. If it's perceived, well, since the Democrats are in the majority in the House especially, and I'm a member of the House, I see this a lot. And I see this on my committee. And you can even have a Democrat present an issue, and if it's perceived that this came from a Republican idea, the Democrats devour each other and will torpedo a great idea. And we saw it with Representative Heather Saraki's bill on female genital mutilation.
Yeah, that was a huge one.
That was so shocking, and the utter disbelief of voting on it 4 different times. Mm-hmm. How in the world can these people just vote against it? If it's because they don't like Representative Saraki. That is so infantile and so immature. It's disgusting. Mm-hmm. And I think it's those types of experiences that, I don't know, on one hand, I'm utterly disgusted. And on the other hand, it puts a fire in my belly that we need to do something different. And if that means we need to get the majority, then we better knuckle down and do it. And we better get some people willing to step up, and we need good people. Mm-hmm. And we need people that are bringing some skill sets to the table, that have some training. It is a sacrifice. It's a huge sacrifice being up there. And I question it a lot. I struggle with it I wouldn't say daily, but definitely on a weekly basis. I struggle with it. When I come home after being gone all week because of the Education Committee and the commitments on that committee, I come back home and I question what I'm doing all the time. However, I also have to stop and think, what would be happening if I wasn't there?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the referendums that we ended up voting on last November really pretty much monopolized the legislative session. And one of them was the education funding. Yeah. So that was tied to 3% tax increase, But let's just talk about the education funding. Well, it's totally ludicrous to think that more money just thrown at a school is going to make a difference. We're increasing our spending twice as fast as the student enrollment is declining. And so the gap actually is more like, it's increasing. It's more like 3%, 3 times the difference in the gap right now as far as the spending and the decline. So we continue to spend at this exorbitant amount, and yet there's no accountability of where the money goes. And as I travel around my district and as I've traveled around the state, the most needy schools are not getting the money. Yep. The way the funding formula flows, a lot of money is going to schools that can actually they have the tax base to be able to raise the funds. I have a district a town in my district that is paying more per pupil allocation than any of the other towns. And I would dare say the cost of living or the gross median income is lower there than any place else in this district. And they have no industry. So how are they going to generate the funds? Yet they're property rich. They have beautiful lakes, and I'm going to go fishing on one of them this week. They're beautiful. It's beautiful property up there. However, you can have all this property and you're living at a poverty level, and yet you're supposed to be paying more per pupil than anybody else in this district. That to me is a total injustice. And so the equity of funding is very skewed. And even with what happened now, you still have districts like, say for example, Cape Elizabeth.
Yeah.
Does Cape Elizabeth need more money? No. They have the means where if they want more money, they can generate it. What about districts up in Aroostook County or in Washington County? Beautiful place, but again, property rich. You drive around I used to work in Lubec. In Machias, Lubec, Whiting, all those areas up there, north of the Belfast area, anywhere north, you start to get into more and more poverty. And money's not flowing into those schools. There's some schools that are getting no money. And still, we've just poured in all this money into the schools.
Well, thank you so much, Representative. And I think that by the end of this video, I think that we're going to have Republicans who see that we really do have a strong advocate with tenacity, grit, experience, and sometimes a pitchfork in their corner. Thank you again so much.
Yes, thank you. This was fun.